privilege to announce our guest speaker today, Congressman Ted Lieu. Very excited to have him here. So I'll make the introduction brief so that we give him a lot more time. So Ted Lieu was elected in 2014 for the California's 33rd Congressional District, replacing Henry Waxman, also somebody who has spoken in this chamber multiple times. He was also the president of the Democratic freshman class, elected by his colleagues, and he also serves on the House Budget Committee and the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. Now, Ted is a former active duty officer in the U.S. Air Force. I'm a former Navy officer, and the Air Force just killed Navy in the recent games. So congratulations on your victory over Navy. I'd have to look at the overall record to see who comes out on top. Now, in Congress, Ted has established himself as a leader on protecting the environment, Social Security and Medicare, civil liberties, and veterans. So those are kind of the key issues, and maybe we'll hear some more about that today. Prior to serving in Congress and after being an Air Force officer, he was in the State Assembly, elected in 2005, as well as the California State Senate in 2011. Lives in Torrance with his family. Without further ado, Congressman Ted Lieu. All right, it's all yours.
Good morning. I am so honored to be here, and thank you, Buzz, for that wonderful introduction. Thank you, Roosevelt, for inviting me and for your leadership. Some of you I know, many of you I'm meeting for the first time, so I'm going to share with you my story, and then I'm going to talk about two issues. The first will be on veterans homelessness, and second, it will be on cybersecurity, and I'll answer any questions that you may have. And my story is the same as your story, or that of your parents or your grandparents. I am an immigrant, and when my parents looked at a map of America, they said, we're going to Cleveland, Ohio. That's where I grew up. We were poor, they did not speak English well, and we went to flea markets and swap meets to sell gifts and jewelry. And they did that for several years, saved enough money, and opened one store in a shopping center, a gift store. They then worked 7 days a week, saved up some more money, opened one gift and jewelry store in the shopping mall. My brother and I would help watch that store, because we were free labor. And eventually, they expanded over 6 stores. So in my mind, they achieved the American dream. They went from being poor to a modest income. They got a house, and they gave my brother and I an amazing education. My brother is a doctor. My parents still remind me of that. And it is one reason I joined the U.S. Air Force on active duty. I believe I can never get back to America. Everything this amazing country is given to my family. It's one reason I'm still in the reserves. I was promoted to colonel earlier this year. I served at Los Angeles Air Force Base in El Segundo. And it's one reason I'm in politics, make sure that this dream remains open for people who want to work hard and succeed. After active duty Air Force, I went into private practice. I am a recovering lawyer, and I then went to a financial services firm, was elected to the State Assembly and then the State Senate, and last term to Congress. Before I go on, I do see some public safety officers here. Just want to honor you for your service, and thanks for keeping us. So in Congress, we got some things done last year, and just really briefly I'll say we did something we haven't done in a long time. We passed a budget. We also reauthorized the Highway Trust Fund for 5 years. That's going to provide a huge amount of resources to states like California and counties and local cities to repair their roads, highways, and bridges. And we also reauthorized an export-import bank that helps both small businesses compete overseas by getting low interest rate loans. In terms of this year, not much will happen. It is a presidential year, but next year I am hopeful we'll get some more things done. And 2 issues I've focused on. One is veterans. Last year I got 3 bills signed into law. 2 of them related to veterans, one of which was a joint piece of legislation with Senator Feinstein. We got hundreds of millions of dollars authorized to VAs across the nation for seismic retrofits, including $35 million to West Los Angeles VA, the largest VA in the nation. And then just last week, the President signed my 4th bill into law. which allows the VA at West LA to implement its master plan. And that master plan, and its full build-out, will improve the delivery of medical services to veterans and their families. It will provide housing, about 1,200 units for homeless veterans at all levels, whether it's permanent supportive housing or something less permanent. And it will also be a sort of a crown jewel of VAs where they want to replicate this design in other places. So it's pretty exciting, and that's going to go forward now, and my office and I are happy to answer any questions if you have specific questions on specific leases within the VA or how things are going to work with the master plan. But that is now going to make a big difference because, as many of you know, for decades the VA was somewhat dysfunctional. It is now going to be a much more functional facility that's going to really help a lot of veterans and then help solve some of the homeless veterans issues. The Obama administration made a big push to solve veterans homelessness in America. You can't do that unless you solve it in Los Angeles County, because it was such a huge population of homeless veterans. And every month we actually do decrease the number of veterans who are homeless, but there's this issue that it also makes LA County extremely attractive, which is our weather. So you're not going to see a lot of homeless veterans in North Dakota. You'll see them here. And as more folks learn that we're helping homeless veterans, more actually will come here. So there's this issue we're dealing with. So we house a huge number of homeless veterans. We still have a ways to go, and this master plan will help do that. The second issue I want to talk about is cybersecurity. And I happen to be one of only 4 computer science majors in Congress. I'm the only Democrat with a CS degree, and it's pretty clear to me that cybersecurity is a problem, both at the private sector and the public sector. On the Oversight Committee last year, we held a number of hearings on the massive breaches at the Office of Personnel Management. Their first breach resulted in millions of Social Security numbers and other private information of federal employees being released. The second breach was even worse. It resulted in over 20 million security clearance records, very sensitive information being released, stolen by a foreign country. I know that because I have a security clearance and my records were stolen. I got a letter from the federal government saying, hey, your records were stolen, now you get 3 years of free credit monitoring. The problem is not even so much to me, it is a huge negative effect on our national security, because now you have a foreign country that knows extremely sensitive information about everyone in America that has a security clearance, including every bad thing we ever did, things about our family, things about court cases, things about all sorts of things that are potentially liable for terms of blackmail and other factors. So this was a huge hit to national security, and it wasn't a kinetic rocket attack, it wasn't ground forces, it was a cyber attack. So when we did these hearings, it was pretty clear to me that Office of Personnel Management was simply not prioritizing cybersecurity. They had 7 years of IG reports showing that they had weak cybersecurity systems. The last IG report was so detrimental, it actually recommended that they shut down some of these systems because they were so weak. And they did not do that. As a result, they got these breaches. I was the first legislator to call for the resignation of the director. She eventually did resign. They got a new director in, and we're working with them to make cybersecurity better. And one of the things we realized is, why is it that you would have a human resources agency protecting what's been called the crown jewels of U.S. national security? It would be like the Department of Agriculture protecting on nuclear launch codes. Right? It doesn't make any sense. So I worked with a Republican, Steve Russell out of Oklahoma, who also has security clearance. He's a former Army colonel. And we wrote letters to administration, we introduced legislation, and we said, look, you gotta move this database to a Department of Defense agency. Earlier this year, the Obama administration did a whole report, did a whole interagency coordination, and they agreed with us. And so they moved it now to U.S. Cyber Command. Well, hopefully this won't happen again. But in terms of your cybersecurity, there are all sorts of ways for you to get hacked. Earlier this year, I was on 60 Minutes, and and my staff got this call from 60 Minutes, and they said, hey, we want to hack your boss's cell phone. So my staff, of course, said, yes, go ahead. But 60 Minutes was nicer. They didn't want to mess up my own cell phone, so they went and brought an Apple iPhone off the shelf, gave it to me, and said, keep it for a week. We're going to try and hack it. So I kept it for a week. I was in Washington, D.C., and then I was in California. When I went back for the interview, the first thing they did was they played back recordings of conversations I had on that phone with my staff and with other people. It was quite disturbing and creepy. And they also showed where I was. They could track my location, and they could acquire my text messages. It is a flaw known as the signaling system number 7 flaw. SS7 is how people refer to it. And it's a problem in the telephone networks. So what happened is decades ago when they set up these telephone networks, they assumed that every network was a trusted network. So let's say you want to call somebody in Africa. Your USA network might hand off to a European network that then hands off to an African network. Well, the problem is some of these trust networks end up being owned, operated by countries like Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, or criminal syndicates or hackers associated with these countries. And as long as you have this telephone network, you can access anybody's phone messages and text messages just knowing their cell phone number. It is a pretty massive, huge flaw, such that the Federal Communications Commission launched an investigation basically the day after the 60 Minutes episode aired. 2 congressional committees are now looking at this, and we're trying to find a way to fix it, but it's hard because you had all this infrastructure set up decades ago, not dealing with the new cybersecurity threats. The way you can protect yourself is you can go to encryption. You can use applications like WhatsApp or Signal or telephone. You can download those on your cell phone, and if somebody else has the same app and you communicate with them through text or voice, it will be encrypted, which means if Russian hackers got that information, there's not much that they could do with it. And then let me conclude by an even easier way for you to lose your information, and that is public Wi-Fi. So on your phone, if you go to, let's say, Starbucks or a hotel or LAX, and you log on to public Wi-Fi, would you know if the Wi-Fi that says LAX_1 is the correct one, or LAX1, or just LAX? You would have no idea, just as I had no idea. But one of those could be fake. And if it's fake, it means a hacker has set it up. And once you log onto it, within a second, the hacker will have all the information on your phone. And sometimes this will happen without you even knowing it. If you set up your phone to where it logs on automatically to Wi-Fi, you could walk past a Starbucks, it will log on to some fake Wi-Fi, and then wham, the hacker has all your information. So my suggestion to you is, I would rarely, if ever, use public Wi-Fi unless you are very certain that that Wi-Fi is the correct one. So with that, happy to answer any questions you may have. My goal is to scare you, and I'm happy to talk more about cybersecurity if you want. In fact, mobile devices have an incredible lack of protection. So it got so bad, in fact, that Republican Congressman William Hurd out of Texas and he also has a CS degree. We wrote a letter to our House colleagues earlier this year saying, look, you need to take these steps to protect your phone, to do better cybersecurity hygiene, because we have this enormous infrastructure, the House Communications Information Office, that spends all this money protecting our networks and our desktops, and then they do nothing on our cell phones. But many of you, and now if you look at the federal workforce and the private sector workforce, a lot of people now do their work on their phone. And sometimes your phone is hooked up to your desktop through your email system. So my phone right now is linked to my government email. So my government email on my desktop has all this protection, and there's virtually no protection on my cell phone. That doesn't make a lot of sense, and so we're trying to get that fixed. But I think that's the same for many of you as well. You should look into that, and with that, have to answer any questions. Yes?
Good morning, Senator. I was looking recently at a filming of Robert Greenwald film on gun control, and I believe you were part of a sit-in in Congress, and you give a great speech. And I think generally you're trying to keep people that are on a terrorist watch list from getting guns, and some other folks that don't qualify. Would you like to speak to that at all?
Yeah, happy to talk about gun violence. There are 3 bills that I am supporting and many members in Congress are supporting. We have a majority, but we don't have a supermajority, so that is an issue we're trying to get there. The first bill says we're going to implement background checks the way that California has it, and we're going to do it nationwide. That shouldn't be that controversial. In fact, most gun owners also support universal background checks. And the reason you want it universal is the way the current system works. If you go to a gun store and want to buy a gun, there's a 3-day waiting period. They do all these background checks on you to make sure you can buy the gun. Or you can just walk into a gun show, pay cash, get a gun. Does that make any sense to you? Right? It's just a massive gaping loophole. So what we want to do is say, no, look, if you go to a gun show, you got to go through the same background check. It should not be controversial. The second bill says we're going to close a problem with existing background check, where if you go to a gun store and within 3 days you don't get an answer back, you shouldn't be able to buy the gun. So most gun stores actually won't sell you the gun unless they get an answer back. And in Charleston shooting, what happened is they didn't get an answer back because there was some coordination, miscommunication between the local folks and the FBI. They were going to actually deny it. They didn't get that there in time. Gun store sells the gun, the person goes in a church and kills a bunch of people. So it would close that loophole. And the third basically says, if you have done something so dramatic and it's so scary that our government won't let you get on a plane, then we think you shouldn't be able to go buy an assault rifle. So those are the 3 bills. It's supported by the majority of the American people. We can't even get a vote on those bills. That's why we did a sit-in. We just want to vote. We want representatives to be on record where you stand, and at least have people be able to articulate their positions for why they support or don't support these bills. And we're getting movement. So for the first, so after Sandy Hook, there's been over 1,100 mass shootings, defined as shootings of 4 or more people at the same time. And after that tragic, shooting of the children at Sandy Hook, legislation was proposed and nothing happened. There is a difference now. The legislation that's now proposed is now being co-authored by Republican members of both the House and the Senate. That's something you did not see before. And so the numbers are starting to change, and depending on how this November goes, we may have enough to in fact pass legislation in both the House and the Senate. So that's an update. Yes?
Why is the Social Security number used for insurance purposes?
I'm sorry, social use for?
Why is the Social Security number used for insurance purposes, especially why with Medicare seniors? Have their Social Security number on the Medicare card? I think this is the craziest thing as an insurance agent that I've ever understood. Why couldn't there be a different ID for insurance purposes than the Social Security number? It is incredible. And I don't know. It just blows my mind the way that a 65 and an 80-year-old has to put their Social Security number on top of it.
I agree with you. I will look into that. That doesn't make sense to me either. Thanks for letting me know. I will look into that. Yes?
I have 3 beautiful grandchildren. I have a lot of concerns for their future, but one of them is nuclear weapons. And you were talking about being hacked into all kinds of security devices and you're getting through. Is it possible for somebody from another country, or a terrorist, or some 14-year-old kid to hack into the nuclear codes, not only of us, but of other countries that have nuclear weapons?
So we had a hearing on this. It is possible, it'd be really hard. There are a lot of different layers of protection. But let me actually tell you something that is more likely. So how many of you know what it takes to launch a nuclear first strike? To launch nuclear weapons in America? Well, I'll tell you, it takes the approval of the National Command Authority, which sounds really impressive until you look at it. It is two people. It is the president and his or her political appointee, the Secretary of Defense, which under law is supposed to simply execute the order of the president. Once that happens, the military carries out the orders and the nuclear weapons launch. So nuclear experts and national security experts and academics knew about this issue where a very small number of people can destroy the world. And it sort of really didn't raise that many alarms because whether you supported Romney or McCain or Obama or Bush, you didn't think they were crazy. You do have a nominee now that is erratic, right? Has made statements such as if we have nuclear weapons, why shouldn't we use them? Has made statements saying Japan and South Korea should have nuclear weapons. And so now people are going, what would it take if that person were president and he had a bad day or bad night at 3 a.m. and decides he wants to do something? It would just take him giving an order. So Senator Markey and I introduced legislation last week, and our view as the framers of the Constitution put enormous checks and balances on the president. They created an entire Congress, an entire legislative branch to stop the president, an entire judiciary to stop the president. So for something to happen in the United States, President and Congress have to agree, and the courts have to not overturn it. So there's all these checks and balances on executive power. There is, in my opinion, no way the framers would have authorized a nuclear first strike. Because what they did is they then gave the most important power to Congress, which is the power to declare war. A nuclear first strike can kill hundreds of millions of people in half an hour and have decades of negative effects. That is war. If you don't call that war, you basically made the term war meaningless in the Constitution. So our legislation is pretty simple. It says the framers gave Congress the power to declare war. The president cannot launch a nuclear first strike without first getting a declaration of war from Congress. That's it. And hopefully the courts will actually rule it that way. And if this legislation passes, it would actually stop the US president from launching a nuclear first strike. Former Secretary of Defense William Perry supports this legislation. I asked him the question, with America's amazing conventional military, where we have a fleet of B-2 bombers, stealth, a fleet of B-1 bombers, air-launched cruise missiles, sea-launched cruise missiles, a massive array of weapons, is there any scenario where you would need a nuclear weapon that you couldn't take care of with American conventional weapons? And he said, no, there is no such scenario. Which is why President Obama, if you read the New York Times and some other articles, suggests that he personally wants to go to a no first strike policy, the way that China and some other countries already have. And hopefully this legislation will also give him another way to look at it, which is simply a constitutional view, that our current nuclear launch approval process is just unconstitutional. The framers just would not have given the power to two people to destroy America, right? Now, I do believe in mutual assured destruction. That's the whole theory of nuclear deterrence, which is that if a country launches nuclear missiles at us, we will destroy them. That does not depend on a first strike.
Right.
It just depends on our ability to destroy whoever's launching at us. So our legislation does not apply to anything but a nuclear first strike. So with that, hopefully we can make us a little bit safer.
Do one more question.
Okay,
The line comes back. Thank you.
If so much personal information available to be hacked, why don't they have the really personal information on a closed system and maybe have a redacted version on systems that can be hacked? Why are they given the chance to have so much personal information available to begin with and not have it redacted and have the full thing on a closed system?
So that's a good point. Well, so for example, the security clearance database, you need that information, right, to do background checks and so on. So it has to reside somewhere, and the issue is, how do you protect that? And our view is the Department of Defense would be better than the Human Resources Agency. But even closed systems, right, are susceptible to hacking. And part of it is not even so much technology, right? So the federal government is pretty antiquated. We still have systems running on COBOL, which is a really old language. But it's just having human beings, and human beings will make mistakes, will go rogue, or mess up. The NSA is probably the most secure closed system in the entire world. We know a lot about them now because a person named Snowden went rogue, and he gave a whole bunch of information to a lot of people. Our CIA director last year had his AOL account hacked. You might wonder, why would our CIA director have an AOL account? But the way that was hacked is people posing as Verizon employees, hackers, tricked some legitimate Verizon employees to giving up some information about his Verizon account. And then they used that to go ahead and hack his AOL account. So now we had, human beings in a different company causing a breach that affected a second company that affected the CIA director's account. And so it's just that you have all these systems where it's really easy to get in because your cyber defense is only as strong as your weakest link, and hackers are pretty good at finding out what that is. And just one last point. So the massive Target breach happened because of a subcontractor, an HVAC subcontractor that they went through. So it's just something that both the private sector and public sector have to do more in terms of awareness and upgrading our systems and just training employees to be much more aware about cybersecurity. So thanks so much for having me here, and thank you.